As Chohan of the Third Ray and hierarch of the Chateau de Liberté retreat, Paul the Venetian is the sponsor of Ascended Master culture for this age. And he says that this is the keystone or the capstone in the pyramid of the Golden Age. Now, the masters have said that it's through culture that mankind will come to spiritual truths and teachings of the Great White Brotherhood. So it's important that we manifest Ascended Master culture. And Paul the Venetian is the one to whom we will call. So what do we mean by culture? It's important to really understand the full perspective what this is. So the dictionary says it has several definitions. The first is the quality in a person or society that arises from a concern for what is regarded as excellence in arts, letters, manners, scholarly pursuits, etc. And then another meaning is a particular form or stage of civilization as that of a certain nation or period. For example, the Greek culture. And of course now we have the American culture. And what is our culture right now? The third definition is the development or improvement of the mind by education or training. So culture has a very broad meaning, both for the individual, for education and training, as well as excellence in many areas of life. Now, you may not know a lot about Paul the Venetian, but I was really very thrilled to learn more about him and about his background. The messengers and the masters in their retreats have described him as a majestic being, 6 feet 5 inches tall, very precise, I'd say, with a fair countenance and deep blue eyes and golden wavy hair. He wears clothing of emerald green velvet. He's a native of Venus, so he naturally outpictures beauty and grace and diplomacy and tact because the evolutions of that planet, they radiate harmony and divine love. They have mastered these areas. They said his voice is melodious and kind, bringing comfort and peace to all who come in contact with his presence. And interestingly enough, Paul's retreat, the Chateau de Liberté in southern France, has a physical counterpart. It's a physical chateau, little mansion, that's now owned by a French family. And they actually interpenetrate slightly, which is quite unique for the masters' etheric retreats. Now, at the etheric level, the retreat contains classrooms and paintings and artwork from all ages, all races, all cultures, as well as workshops for musicians, writers, sculptors, and students of voice. And here the masters also introduce new techniques in every field of art. Paul now currently holds classes in the Temple of the Sun, the etheric retreat of the Goddess of Liberty over Manhattan. This is the retreat of Paul's spiritual mother, the Goddess of Liberty, the ascended being, the master behind the statue. Paul the Venetian has promised an important initiation to those who come knocking at the door of his retreat in southern France, ready for the greater increment of the love flame. He says, I will take you by the hand and show you my castle. I will show you the works of art that have been brought forth by Keela's unascended and ascended. And we will go through the many rooms. And lastly, I will take you to the room where there is that frame that hangs. In some cases, it will be an empty frame. In some cases, it will have a canvas in it. It will be your frame, the frame of your identity, waiting for you to bring forth the genius of your soul. And when you see that frame, if it's empty, you'll want to fulfill it. So we can call to go to Paul's retreat at night before we go to sleep. And we can be shown that frame of our identity. So make that call before you go to sleep and take advantage of that dispensation. Now, in the days of Atlantis, Paul served in the government as the head of cultural affairs. And before that continent sank, he established a focus of the Liberty Flame in Peru, in South America. And I find that very interesting, since here we are in South America. And this focus of the Liberty Flame actually stimulated the culture, the beauty, and the wealth of the Incan civilization. And the Incan civilization is quite impressive. When you see all that they created and accomplished in just simply like about 97 years, it's very, very impressive. And you have to wonder the advancement and how that culture completed everything in such a short period of time. That's almost one generation or 1.5 generations. He actually embodied in that civilization as an artist who created paints that did not fade, do not fade. And he brought that same skill to his last embodiment, which was Pallarese Veronese in Italy, who was that one of the major artists of the 16th century. That's probably the lifetime that we're most familiar with. He was also embodied in Egypt as a master of esoteric architecture, where he worked with El Morya, who was a master mason at that time, the time when they were building the pyramids. Paul also talks about the artist Norman Rockwell, the American artist. You may be familiar with his paintings. You may not, but he studied in Paul's retreat at inner levels. And Paul says he counseled him to show the Christ in the American people in his art, in everyday scenes of humor or humility or wonder or togetherness or heroism. And if you see his paintings, you will see how he portrayed different scenes of American life. And it has a very special vibration. Paul talks about him and calls him and says of him, he's a unique artist, one devoted to the inherent qualities and identity of the individual. As his perception of the Christ was, so was his painting, the capturing of unique moments. You might examine that work to find in each painting what is the glimmer, however great or faint, of some aspect of the individual reaching for the higher self. So I would suggest, if you do not know those paintings, to look them up and observe the things that Paul is talking about. Now, in a dictation given January 15th, 1984, through the messenger Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and it's found in volume 27, number 3 of the Pearls of Wisdom, Paul says, I am Paul the Venetian. I paint on canvas, on the ethers. I etch in crystal. I sculpt. I mold the clay. I fashion all things physical in many substances not known to you in the higher octaves. And he asks, to what purpose? And he answers his own question. To the purpose of showing forth an ever more revealing and exquisite image of the Christ appearing in children, in people from every walk of life. Then he asks another question. Is it any wonder that we deplore the chaotic and abstract art that has no point of unity? It also portrays a certain barrenness and absence of that point of light in the individual. One can see anarchy by an absence of dimension, an absence of harmony or focalization in modern art. How interesting that one can see anarchy in the absence of harmony and focalization in modern art. He says modern art enters the subconscious. Accordingly, whether or not the artist is influenced by marijuana or other substances, art portrayed in fabric design, wall coverings, clothing style. It becomes a matrix capable or incapable of carrying some measure of Christly proportion. So think about that. Our very wall coverings, curtains, clothing, they carry the vibration of the designer, of the artist behind them. And look at what we have in some of our art. Look at what walks down that aisle and that ramp with fashion. So we can see and we can evaluate, is it carrying some measure of Christly proportion? He said, when the people's art and the sense of art flounders, then the images of Christ recede. And I find that very interesting. It's when these inharmonious matrices come forth, the image of Christ recedes. We can see that happening in our society. He says it is rare to find a work of art that comes from the etheric octave in this period. Where will your leaders learn to deal with the invaders of the minds of the nations? The invaders of the minds of the nations. And he answers his own question again. They will learn from the etheric schoolrooms in cities and retreats. But how will they get there if they do not contain the crystal that becomes the magnet and a star to follow when the soul goes forth from the body in the hours of sleep? So how can they get to the retreats to be able to learn in the etheric retreats? He says, unless angels and devotees of light accompany them, they will have no new idea, no means of resolution. Without internal harmony, that is the direct child of perfect love, harmony, the direct child of perfect love, there's no resolution to international terror or the threat of nuclear war. And while abortion itself seems to me the supreme act of anti-art, it does beget the callousness that year by year has a lessening sensitivity to the art of angels and the art of God who fashioned the perfect image out of which he was sculpted in clay. And we see today in the state of New York, in the United States, where they have now passed a law that you can have abortion up to the very day before birth. To get the callousness that year by year has a lessening sensitivity to the art of angels and the art of God, who fashioned us in his image and likeness. Thus, beloved ones, it is necessary in the very midst of the most tense international circumstances to retreat into the contemplation of the divine beauty and the music of the spheres. And this is a great key for us, for the light bearers who must perceive the darkness on the planet, but must retreat to the contemplation of divine beauty and music of the spheres, to keep that balance, to stay in that higher vibration. And to remember that the building blocks of creation are sound. And that sound forms a pattern that is a divine harmony. And that this divine harmony can be portrayed in architecture, in life, in everyday utensils such as pottery. The things you use and you surround yourself with become a focus for the flow of attention. The focus of the flow of your attention, the things you surround yourself with. Then he says, art is not a subject so often dwelt upon in our discourses, for there are such pressing needs, and we know this. Pressing needs of the hour for the victory for Saint Germain. He says, I bring my ingredient of love in this hour as an offering to the Christ child, to the one and the beloved whom I have so longed to paint in the ultimate sense, and have done so to the best of my ability in the etheric octave. Now, in a later dictation given an earlier dictation given in August 1960 through the messenger Mark L. Prophet, he transmits the flame of eternal beauty that he says moves the spirit of man to exclaim, "Oh God, you are so magnificent." He spoke directly from his retreat to a small group of people in a small chapel in Boston. And he said he's bringing to us our sense consciousness, the reality of God's beauty and the infinite fire of his love. We don't often think about beauty so much when we're so focused on handling the energies of the day and such. But beauty is important. And he talks about this in his dictation, and I'll be reading portions of the dictation. He says, "I am inspired with divine compassion this night as I extend the greetings of the Great White Brotherhood out into the world of form. I do so that mankind may not only conceive of the infinite meaning of beauty, but that they may swiftly become breathing examples of the living God beauty." Breathing examples of the living God beauty that is spread abroad everywhere because it is the intent of the All-Father. This is the vision held within the all-seeing eye of God, whose eternal destiny is the progression of the universal consciousness in all worlds everywhere. As I look out upon the universal vision of the infinite cosmos, the universal vision of the infinite cosmos, just see that in your mind. He says, "I behold in those flaming orbs a sense of divine majesty that moves me to exclaim in their midst, 'Behold the wonders of God.'" Think of a time when you either were at the top of a mountain or sitting by a stream or watching an amazing sunset, how you had that same feeling, "Behold the wonders of God." Elevate your consciousness to that point daily, many times daily. Just go back to that moment where you can exclaim, "Behold the wonders of God." He says, "I urge that each and every one of you will begin now to externalize the newness of life." The newness of life. And it gets very practical. He says, "How many of you arise from your beds in the morning with a sense of lethargy, of fatigue, and with a feeling that this day is a day that will be difficult? I ask you to throw out of your consciousness this sense of difficulty. You can toss it out. You have control." And it reminds me of a quote that I shared on Facebook recently, where it says, "You cannot suffer the past or future because they do not exist. What you are suffering is your memory and your imagination." So we want to use that imagination to put ourselves into that very highest vibration. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen, if you begin your day with a sense of the difficult, I do not see how you could end it in any other sense. But if you will begin each day with a sense of infinite beauty and will look out upon life with the thought that this day is God's, and with a feeling that this is a day when you shall sense the beauty of God in life, then you will see, as we who are artists and architects of the Spirit, a sense of the eternal beauty that moves the spirit of man to exclaim, 'Oh God, you are so magnificent.' Ladies and gentlemen, I address you thus, for thus you are eternal beauty in the eyes of Saint Germain, and in the eyes of the august fraternity known as the Great White Brotherhood. You have perhaps pondered the mystical idea of the Great White Brotherhood as some conception of the finite mind. Is that not true? That our finite mind really works to grasp these infinite concepts? He said, "Let me here and now remove from your consciousness such a misconception and hasten to assure you that the infinite power of this august fraternity of spiritual beings, the spirits of just men made perfect, is to assist the great divine plan in being called forth from the heart of God and externalized among mankind. Externalized through us among mankind. That this God consciousness, this golden age, is going to come through us. He continues, I have served in the past and I serve today with gratitude for the opportunity and privilege to love. To love is a privilege, never a duty. To love God is a privilege beyond all privileges. And to love mankind, made in his image, is the second commandment made like unto the first. Oh, I enfold you now with a sense of love, of divine love that reaches out to embrace the eternal concept and to know that out of the flame of divine love is born divine beauty. The sense of divine beauty is the ever newness of each day, of each hour, of each moment, fresh, perennial, and lovely beyond compare. Is this not becoming as the little child who perceives each day, each moment as fresh and lovely? Blessed ones, why is it that with the first blush upon beholding a friend, man is able to sense the majesty and beauty of this friend? But then, as time goes on, and the friend becomes more known unto that one's consciousness, this friend becomes less magnificent, rather than becoming more magnificent. It's an interesting question. It reminds me of a quote from George Bernard Shaw, where he says, the only person I know is my tailor. He measures me anew each time he sees me. He measures me anew each time he sees me. Isn't that what we should be doing with one another? Rather than forming a concept and then holding that concept over each other forever? He continues, this is because the attention he says, blessed ones, why is it that the first blush upon beholding a friend, man is able to sense the majesty and beauty of the friend, but then as time goes by, that fades. And the friend becomes more known unto that one's consciousness. And this friend becomes less magnificent rather than becoming more magnificent. He says this is because the attention that is now placed upon the friend is not upon the great God self of that individual, but is placed upon the ephemeral, the transitory, the human. The attention, and it's interesting how he describes this now. He says the attention is placed upon that side of the friend that is but a child in the hand of its cosmic mother, extending those tiny hands upward, looking hopefully to that cosmic mother to guide, to guard, to protect, to direct the footsteps of that tiny babe until growing up in Christ's consciousness, the babe shall become the man-child with all of the beauty of Christ's accomplishment. So instead of seeing ourselves or seeing another as that child and not perfect in Christ, we can see them as the living Christ. And then we can maintain that vision of that one. He says, ladies and gentlemen, love is the power that moves the world. Love is the power that frames the world. Love is the power that sustains the brotherhood. Love is the power that is the cohesive force throughout the universe by which stars are born and through which is extended into the finite the grace of infinite capacities of God. Is not love, then, to be adored? How many of you have thought of adoring love? Adoring love is to love love, and it is the very self-same nature of God to adore himself. This is not a divine narcissism. It is a case of God being the great giver and no receiver at all. He gives, for God has given life to all, and he has given beauty to all. He gives to all mankind his eternal compassion in order to guide them and to guard their footsteps until they come to that place of life where they are masters of force, masters of energy, masters of divine power, adepts, spiritual adepts. And there is no power whatsoever in the world that can move them aside from following and pursuing the spiritual path all the way to eternal victory. He continues, at the present time it is necessary because of the cosmic moment for me to speak through this instrument whose consciousness and lips I use in order to reach your hearts. He's speaking through the messenger, Mark L. Prophet. He says, the day will come indeed when this epoch shall pass. But when it passes, I pray God that man will have that same direct apprehension that this instrument has. He's speaking of the messenger. The capacity to reach into the great cosmic light and to draw therefrom the consciousness of those of us who have won our victory, who have attained through the pain and the suffering of human consciousness and have bypassed it and mounted up into the God consciousness and the victory of immortality. He says, peace be unto you in this cosmic hour and moment. Peace be unto you during the wakeful hours of the night, when your soul seems to be troubled by human thoughts. Peace be unto you at every hour with a sense of God's beauty. If this sense of God's beauty shall become strong enough, it shall be because nothing can resist the onrush of its cosmic perfection. And so you will have, by the unfolding softness of divine love, a cushion to assuage all human grief, a balm to wipe out all human fear. This reminds me of the ashram of the World Mother in Los Angeles back in the 1970s and early 80s. This was a magnificent place that the messenger duplicated an etheric temple. And when you entered that, you felt that etheric temple. And you felt that you were elevated. And we used to do the healing services. We stood at the top of the stairs. And I have to say that is some of the very highest experiences that I experienced spiritually, was leading a healing service at the top of that stairwell in the ashram of the World Mother. It was a magnificent experience and one that has stayed with me forever. And it is truly a transforming opportunity to be part of that. He continues, O beloved ones, the great white brotherhood, beholding the perilous hours, facing the mankind of earth, now urged as never before, there shall be a unity of spirit among all those who profess to serve the cause of the great white brotherhood. A unity of hearts, a unity of your being with your own great God presence. This is so needed if you are to accomplish the fiat of the moment. God has sent forth the call to man. Will man answer it and raise his brother? Will he raise the fallen among mankind? Will he assist the brotherhood in doing the necessary and averting from the earth the pain of war and the discord that is now threatening the planetary body? I am so hopeful. The Mahachohan has raised his head and has invoked this cosmic hope anew. We invoke it in your hearts tonight. We invoke it in the hearts of all mankind. It is not within our power to respond for you. This you must do for yourself. Sometimes in the moments of loneliness, you may think that your thoughts go unperceived by us. May I assure you that you are never alone. We are as near and as close as your hands and feet. and as your incoming and outgoing breath. We hope that you will hold this focus steadfast until, pushing out beyond these walls, you may expand this activity in a limitless way in order to assist the earth and its people in finding the freedom which God intends. It is a freedom that up to this point, all of the blessed religions of the world and the sincere people have not been successful in prosecuting for God. But today, pinning our hopes on the hearts of the few, we are certain that you shall perform a mighty work for the freeing of the earth, its environs, its people, and every deva and builder of form until the perfect archetype shall be manifest among mankind. The new civilization that shall be born in South America shall become a reality fostered and nurtured by the great white brotherhood. And he's referring to the seventh root race, souls who have never embodied before, who are destined to embody in South America. The golden age that shall come will be a reality from sea to shining sea, and America's heart, together with India's head, shall rejoice evermore in the great mantra of the brotherhood, Om Mani Padme Hum, that the great shining jewel within the heart of the lotus may come into full manifestation. His spirit, which was never born and which shall never cease to be, shall manifest in form those capacities intended in that divine blueprint. That great reality held in God's own heart and consciousness. And then every tear shall be wiped away from every human eye, and they shall know peace without limit. I thank you and bid you good evening. We thank you, beloved Paul the Venetian. We thank you for this infusion of your divine love and beauty and caring for each and every one of us embodied on this planet. We call for that divine beauty. We call for that divine love to infuse our beings now, to transform us, to remake us in the image and likeness of our God presence, that we might be elevated to that presence of God, that we might see, we might hear, we might think and feel and be at the level of the Christ, and all that we do, all that we bring to a suffering world. We are grateful to thee, beloved Paul the Venetian. We thank thee for this amazing message, for this opportunity to bask in the light and love of your presence. In the name of the Father, the Mother, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.